All right, so it's good to see everybody for another Tanya Tuesday. Today we have really an incredible topic, so I'm excited to go through it with you, as well as we will show a video in the middle. I should actually move this over to that screen as well. Um, we are in the chapters where we're talking about love of God, and we have explained in previous chapters, and we will explain here as well the importance of love within your divine service of God. And we explained that the love and the awe is what makes the mitzvah connected to God. We gave examples previously in the Tanya when you do an action of loving kindness for your spouse, but there's no love in it, there's no feeling in it, there may be some level of lacking, and it won't be so much appreciated. For example, we give the example, right? The wife complains to the husband, "I'm sorry, I'm so upset. I never get any anniversary birthday presents." So the husband comes home the next day with like a big chest that you get from like the dentist office for the kids, and he puts it down in the hallway and he says, "All right, honey, here is gifts for your birthdays and anniversaries for the rest of your life. You have everything you ever want, whatever it is that you wanted to buy." And she's like, "That's not the point. The gift has to have the loving kindness in it." Anyways, so um so with that, um so with that, we've been exploring different levels of love that we can approach in our lives, and the meditations that bring to love. Because I can't just tell you to love God; it doesn't work. So we have meditations that help us get to loving God, because that's the way we work. The mind leads to the heart, that leads to action. So specifically, in the last couple chapters, we spoke about ahava rabbah, a great love, avas olam, a worldly love, which we explained to mean a love from a distance or love from closeness. A love when you're trying to get close to God, which is a love of a flaming fire, right? When there's something you want to get, but you don't have it yet. There's a lot of passion in there. Or there's a love of closeness, which is a love of pleasure, right? When you get the item, then it's a love of enjoyment and pleasure. Then last week we spoke about a love that may be a little easier for us to appreciate, a love that is both created and inherited. And what I mean by that is a love that's inherent to you, but also requires some level of meditation. That is the love of recognizing the God as our life. In other words, just as when we recognize, just as we love our lives, we should love God too, because God is our life. I assume most people here would say they love themselves and they love their life, right? One of the most important things we all love in our life is our life itself. And if we were to come to realize that God is our life, then we would also, if you see this as crooked, okay. If we were to realize that God is our life, then we would come to love God. That was the meditation of last week, a closer meditation, and it was inherent within us because God is indeed our life. And this love for ourselves, this love for God is really love of our soul being a piece of God. So by virtue of loving our soul, we will come to love God. That was the explanation last week of a type of love that is more within reach because it's kind of already built into our psyche. So again, we can love God how? By loving ourselves. And when we come to appreciate that ourselves is God, piece of God, and that's what our life is, then we come to love God. So if anybody here ever loves themselves, loves life, they will come to love God. This week, we're going to go into a different type of love. We're going to go into a love that is also requires some meditation, but not as deep of a meditation as the original meditations of the worldly love or great love, which were loves to understand God. In other words, that's the differentiation between the two loves we're learning here in this chapter versus the loves we learned previously. The loves we've learned previously requires you to understand a lot about God. When you understand a lot about God, then you will desire to get close to God. Whether you actually get close to him or whether you're distant from him, that creates a level of love. These meditations do not require you to understand God deeply. It just requires you to either meditate about what's already existing in your life. So one meditation was meditating about how God is your life, because you already love life. The second meditation we're going to learn about is the love of a child to a father or a parent, but uses the child to a father, as we say in our prayers, Avinu Malkeinu. Okay? So that is the love we're going to talk about today. We read in this past week's Torah portion, right? Was the Torah portion of Akev. We read that we are the children of God, right? The Torah calls us the children of God. So if we are the children of God, then God is our father. Now, technically, God doesn't have a gender, and Hasidic philosophy explains that the language of calling God a father or a mother really depends on what element of God's relationship with us we're talking about, because the names father and mother represent the different divine spiritual energies. But generally, we say God is our father. Okay, we don't say God is our mother. There are certain names of God that are feminine, but whenever we describe God as a parent, we will always pick father. I don't think you will ever find mother. Maybe in the Song of Songs, to an extent, maybe over there. But generally you'll find the language father, because again, it's referring to a specific energy of God. Okay, so with that side point, okay, the idea of understanding God as our Father, okay, and loving God as a Father is a little bit foreign in today's society. And I say that because today's society has made it vogue and in to maybe not for those of you the older generation, but today's society has made it vogue and in to complain about your parents, right? It's become the in thing to talk about the trauma that your parents have given you. I said I wouldn't say any jokes today, but maybe I will, right? So they told a joke of three Jewish bubbies sitting in the, Palm Beach, Florida, and discussing how good their children are. So the first one says, "You wouldn't believe my Shefela, my child is so good that for my birthday she sent me this beautiful car." The next one says, "Oh, you wouldn't believe my Shefela, my daughter is so good, she bought me this beautiful house." And the third one says, "You wouldn't believe my Shefela, my daughter is the most amazing. She loves me so much. She spends hundreds of dollars to see a therapist every single week, and all she does is she talks about me." So the idea is we live in a society today where where it's become vogue to complain about your parents. And I think there's two sides of it. Obviously there are parents that have given their children serious trauma. There's trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t. But and I'm sure there have been such very, very terrible parents. But on a whole, it's created this almost impossible standard that parents have to be perfect, and everyone can just go around complaining all day about their parents. And the reality is, parents are never perfect because human beings are not perfect. And as I heard one parenting psychologist say, we're all going to give trauma to our kids, no matter how good we try. To a certain extent, our kids will have what to complain about us. And I think the previous generations chose to understand that people aren't perfect, but it's my parent, and I love my parent, and they do so much for me. In other words, were they whitewashing anything their parents may have done? I don't think so. I think it was understanding that started a fun of therapy for my kids. Understanding that people aren't perfect, and in some ways, I feel like almost we've made it so popular to complain about our parents that sometimes kids are going to therapy for their parents when really what their parents did was nothing really egregious or majorly an issue. And they may be, it's like life is full of small issues, and maybe we're, if we try to resolve and spend too much time in every single minor issue, I think it becomes too much. Again, some people cannot handle minor issues. That's their temperament, and they may have to heal from that. But I don't know necessarily we're in a healthy place in society where every single issue requires a whole drill down and deep drill down into the issues, right? Um, so that's why I'm saying I'm giving this preface because we're talking about here this idea of this child who will do anything for their parent. And I think many of the older generation, not everybody, but many of the older generation felt that today's society, it doesn't exist as much. So some of the people in today's society will read what we're going to read in the Tanya and will say it doesn't really speak to me because they can't appreciate it. So for such people, I would say at the very least, understand the love you have to your children. Right? Which is obviously you would do anything for your child. Now, the reason that Tanya doesn't give the example of a love of a parent to a child, right, and that's how we should love God, is because that's not our actual relationship with God. Our relationship with God is actually God as the parent giving to us, and we are the young children accepting from Him. So Tanya could not tell you, well, you should meditate, that just like a parent would do anything for their child, you should do anything for God, because we're trying to give a realistic description and example of what is happening. And so imagine you were to have the parent like God, which God is the perfect parent, of course, where God gives everything. And even when we are undeserving, and though there are times He disciplines us, He only disciplines us with love. And always, ultimately, He makes sure everything turns out for the best. So the Torah, so therefore we have to give an example of a love of a child to a parent, because that's the reality of the relationship we have with God. So again, even though it would have been easier and more convenient to think about, just like a child loves a parent, just like a parent loves a child, we should love God. But that would not be a realistic description. And what the Tanya is trying to do is to give us a meditation that is within reach and is also um, very much true, right? Because that's what makes it an easy meditation. If we were to truly meditate and realize how God is our parent, that He created us, brought us into being, takes care of us like a parent does for a child, and takes care of us in a detailed way. He cares about every single one of His children. He doesn't just rely on general knowledge. God worries about the details of our lives, okay? So let's put it this way. Think about how if you have trouble appreciating your parent, okay? If you have trouble understanding the love of a child to a parent because you had a difficulty with your parenting, then I would say do the meditation like this. Think about the care and the love that you have for your children. And then think about how God does the same for us. And then imagine, therefore, how much you should be loving God. And not only that, God does for us much better than we do for our own children, okay? We only do the best that we can for our children. God is the perfect parent, okay? So that would be what I would tell you. If you have trouble appreciating this love of a child to a parent, because you may struggle with loving your parents for whatever reason, which is possible, think about how much you care about your children, how you try your best for your children, you put everything on the line for your children. Realize God does the same for us, okay? We disappoint Him so often. We mess up so often. And, you ever had your child that, just drives you crazy and makes a mess and doesn't go to bed and whatever else it is, right? And yet you love them beyond and you continue to do everything for them. God does that for us tenfold. And therefore, this is a meditation that we can love God like a child. And of course, this is a very important meditation as we get towards Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We're going to say multiple times throughout the prayers, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. And as we say, our Father, our King, we should be thinking about how God is on the one hand our King, and we're His subjects, but also God is our Father. And we have that dual relationship with God. And that's what should bring us to a great feeling of love for God. God is the most loving parent, and therefore we should love Him back. Now, practically, what does the practical love of loving a parent look like? So we've explained what love loving God from a distance looks like. We've explained what loving God from a closeness looks like. We've even explained what loving God like your life looks like. What is loving God like a parent? What type of love does it add? And the answer is, as we're going to explain, is loving God like a parent means you will do anything for him, even when it's not in your best interest. That's what it means. In other words, the love of God that is based on I love myself, right? So just like I love myself, I love God because God is my life. But then when godliness gets in the way of your fun in life, or what you enjoy in life, you may say, well, I love God like I love my life, but I love my life. So if God is asking me things that are not enjoyable for me, maybe I don't want to do it. When you love God like a child loves a parent, will do anything for the parent, you will do anything even when it's uncomfortable. You spend, I know many people here have spent thousands of dollars on their parents, have for the care of their parents as they age, have done so many incredible things for their parents out of love, and which means ultimately that you will do things that are not convenient and not in your best self-interest out of love for your parent. And again, if loving your parent doesn't work for you, again, use my other way of it, how much you would love your children, and and you would hope your children would reciprocate. So this is what the love of God like a father means. If we were to love God like a father, that means when we turn to God, we say, God, while you take care of me, and no matter how many times I disappoint you, I'm going to go the extra mile for you. Even if something that God is asking about seems to be not within our best interest, right? Taking care of an elderly parent is not the most, quote unquote, it's not, you're not being able to enjoy your life to its fullest. Now you have to go spend time with your parents. But I know many people that do it lovingly, and they don't see it as a burden because they love them so much, right? Unfortunately, earlier this year, my grandfather passed away, and the amount of care and love he got in his last couple months from all his children and grandchildren, spending money and flying there and being with him and taking care of him, taking out of their schedules. Nobody felt like it was a burden, right? It was all out of great love, right? When you have that kind of love, that's another example, by the way. If you don't appreciate it about your parents, maybe appreciate it about your grandparents. Grandparents are easier to love because they don't have to tell you off so much. But to a certain extent, if you don't appreciate it about your parents, you can understand about your grandparents, right? Even when you're doing things that you never even think to frame it that way. Like nobody thinks flying or going to see their parents is like a burden on them because it's not a burden. It's something we do lovingly. The same thing we should have when it comes to God. So with that, let's take a look at the Tanya as it describes. Well, actually, before I get to Tanya, one more thing the Tanya said. The Tanya says, the ultimate person who achieved this level of love of their parent was Moses. Now, me and you were not all Moses. However, as we said earlier, when it came to awe of God, how Moses was the epitome of awe of God. And even though we can't reach it, we have a little bit of Moses in us. Similarly, when it comes to loving God like a parent, though Moses was the epitome of this and would do anything for God like a child does for a parent, we have a little bit of Moses in us, and we can also do it to a certain extent. Now, I'm also going to give you one more practical way of eliciting this love of God like a child for a parent. But first, let's read the first section where he just describes this love. So let's read inside. Again, we're in chapter 44, page 560 in the Practical Tanya. Okay, 568. Sorry, page 568. Starts like the section 3, finding your selfless love. Now we will learn a second meditative technique to awaken feelings for God which are present already in your soul. This technique is aimed at producing an even higher level of love than the meditation in section 2. And he says like this, an even greater love and more expansive than this. And why does he say it's more expansive than loving yourself and loving your life, which God is your life? Because now you'll sacrifice for God, which is also latent in every soul of Israel as an inheritance from our patriarchs, but still requires meditation to awaken it, is what the Zohar and Raya Mehemna refers to as love like a son who exerts himself for a father and a mother whom he loves more than himself, more than his own nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The passage in the Zohar was cited by Rabbi Dovber, the Maggid of Mezrich, and earlier thinkers as depicting a completely selfless love. Okay? Um, Generally speaking, love is an emotion connected with your self-concept. It's the feeling that you would like to be closer to God, as we learned in chapter 41. The inherent love which is dormant in your heart is your desire to connect with Him. Even the powerful love we just discussed in section 2, which was the previous section, is still linked to your self-concept. It's because you love yourself and your life that you love the source of whom your life is God. But the love depicted here by the Zohar is a devotion to God, whom he loves more than himself, more than his own soul, his own nefesh, ruach, and neshama, more than his own life. This love isn't about what you want, but what God wants. You manage to transcend your own desires and even your desire to be close to God. You yearn to fill the divine will, not because you want to fill the divine will, but because the divine will needs to be done. So again, in this type of love, when you love God, you are going to do whatever God wants, not because it brings you any goodies, not because you'll get a better heaven, but rather because you love God so much. Again, think about that parent or the grandparent that you love so much. Hopefully you have one of those examples. I gave my other ways of doing it earlier, right? And you desire them not because you would get anything. It's a pure level of love. There's no self involved in it. It's just an overflowing feeling of love that you will do anything for them. And that's what makes this love unique, because the previous loves have a lot of self inside of it, and this, we remove the self. Since this love is a meditation about God as our Father, it should be attainable by all of us, as don't we all have one Father, Malake, God himself. The love like a son who exerts himself is depicted by the Zohar as the unique level of Moshe, the faithful shepherd. The faithful shepherd rose and bowed before the Blessed Holy One. He wept and said, "May it please you to regard me as a son, that my actions towards the Holy One, blessed be in a Shekhinah, be considered like a son who exerts himself," etc. Now, ask the Tanya, like I said to you before, how can a Tanya suggest that this unique level of Moses is achievable by us? She explains. And although who could possibly say that he has prepared his heart to come close to and attain the level of love of Moshe, the Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, even a thousandth of it? Nevertheless, while this is a level of love indeed unique to Moses, the very edge of and a tag of this love shines to all of Israel from Moses' abundant good and light. In other words, even though we cannot reach the level of Moses, in which we will love God to the extent completely, where, as he said earlier, right, an overflowing level of love where you exert yourself to the ends of the earth for your parent, nevertheless, we can attain a certain sign of it, a certain element of it. As he continues, as the Tikkun Zohar states, that an extension of him, Moses, reaches into every single generation to give our souls light. It is true that this level, that the selfless love is unique to Moshe, but some of Moshe's light shines to all of us, empowering us to attain the very edge of selfless worship. Only, this light of Moses is extremely hidden and concealed within the souls of all of Israel, so you might find it difficult to believe that you can actually attain it. So, before I read further, he's basically told us that this selfless love of God, like a child to a parent, is attainable. Now, we will not all attain it to the level of Moses, but we can attain it to a certain extent. And now he's going to give you, which is rare in the Tanya, it's interesting, but he's going to give you a practical method of attaining it. In other words, in addition to meditation, he's going to give you a practical way of attaining a love of God like a parent. Anybody knows what that might be? I don't think you'll know, so I shouldn't even ask. The way to attain love of God, and the practical way that he's going to tell us, is to start talking to God like a parent. I'll say that again. The practical way to start feeling like God is your parent is to start talking to God like he's a parent. Anybody here ever watched Ushpizin? The movie Ushpizin. It's about this esrog. It's about Shuli Rand. It was a very popular movie years ago. It's all in Hebrew, but it's really, really great. It's actually coming up the high holidays. I would highly suggest everyone to watch it. If you ever want to get to watching it, Ushpizin, okay? So this is the movie. But he's a Breslov guy, the Chassid. Okay, Shuli Rand. It's the movie Ushpizin. I'll share it on the screen again over here. And I'm not going to get into the details of the story, but Breslov is very much known for talking to God. That's their gig. That's their thing. And in this movie, you see very clearly how this Shuli Rand, who's the husband in the movie, which during the movie they were actually married. How this guy Shuli Rand, he's talking to God like a father, and he says father, and he starts using that type of language, those types of words, and that's going to be the argument of the Tanya here, or the suggestion here of the Tanya, is that if you want to love God like a father, start talking to him like a father. Start talking to God like a father, and you will start to feel like he's a father. Okay? Right? We know that in order to have, we see that even in life, right? We need to tell our children we love you, even if we feel it. Words bring out feelings. Words bring out emotions, as well as what does it look like? We'll get to in a moment. Words bring out feelings. Words bring out emotions. So we should be constantly telling our children that we love them. We will feel it, and they will feel it, right? We all know that we need to express what we're feeling. There's a statement from the book of Jeremiah. He says, their faith was cut off. It was lost from their mouths. I'll say that again. The book of Jeremiah, he writes, their faith was cut off. It was lost from their mouths. And one of the commentaries explains, what does that mean? It explains, because it was lost from their mouths, because they stopped talking to God, they stopped expressing their faith with their mouth, it eventually left their feelings. Words that we express bring out our feelings. So if we have feelings of God, we should never let it suffice with the feelings. We need to express it. And when we express it and when we talk about our love with God, then we will start to feel it. So what is a practical? It could be very, very practical. Talk to God. Okay, there's moments of prayer, and during prayer, you have an opportunity to talk to God. But you can also talk to God any time of day, whenever you're going through anything. Say, God, Abba, Father. There's so many Hebrew songs that are on this theme about God being our Father. And you turn to God and you talk to God. Use your words. Don't just think. Use your words. Talk to God like a father. You can watch the movie if you want to get some ideas, but talk to God like he's your father, even if you don't feel it. And sometime at some point you'll get to feel it, especially if you mean it, if you really need something. You'll start to feel it. There is a place in the Amidah, the Shema Kolenu, the hear our voice, O God, over there where you can make a personal prayer. But turn to God and talk to him using your words. And by using words and talking to God like he's your father and meaning it, then you will come to feel it, okay? Now, for me, I can read the Hebrew prayers a lot of times, and I can come to that feeling because I understand the Hebrew when I'm saying the words. If I'm in that mode, right, which I should ideally always be, but if I'm in that mode, I can read the Hebrew words where there's a lot of talk about God being our Father, especially on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and feel it. Okay. Now, for those of you who can do it with the Hebrew prayers, do it. Great. For those of you who can't, do it with the English prayers. But take prayers or say your own prayers in which you literally feel like you're talking to God. Talk to God like you talk to the person in front of you. And talk to God like he's your father, a caring and loving father. Because not just like he is, because he is a caring and loving father. You want to read the Tanya's suggestion inside, and then we can discuss it a little bit more. So he says like this, but in reality, for this love to come out of its latent state, from being hidden and concealed, to be revealed palpably in your heart and mind, it is relatively simple if you apply the right meditative technique, that it's not beyond you, nor is it far away. Rather, the thing is very much within reach of you, in your mouth and in your heart. So everyone wants to know, what does the mouth have to do with the heart? If selfless love would be a level you had to reach unaided, it would indeed be a formidable task. But since you already have it deep in the recesses of your soul, all you need to do is find it, and that's within reach if you follow the corrective meditative path, namely, by accustoming your mouth with audible vocalization that stimulates concentration of the mind and heart. Right? when it comes to prayer, when we pray louder, you bring more concentration. Okay, if you ever pray, my ideal shul is where you would hear everybody, the whole prayers. Be my ideal shul. If your voice can handle it. Sometimes my voice hurts, but the ideal shul is everyone's davening. Right? Everyone's saying the words because audible expression of the prayers bring automatically a certain level of feeling. Try it yourself. Pray quietly, whisper. Okay, the Amidah has to be a whisper. But aside from that, all the other prayers, and even then, when you whisper, you have to hear it to your ears. But all the other prayers, say it with some level of audibility. Hear it. Namely, by accustoming yourself with audible vocalization and stimulates concentration of the mind and heart to think deeply about the giver of life, of the blessed Holy One. So that's what it says, in your mouth and in your heart. It's interesting. When you talk about it, you feel it. As he just continues here, that he quite literally is our true father and the source of our life, to stir up love for him like the love which a child has for a father. If you train yourself to do this consistently, then habit will become second nature, and you'll actually begin to feel a selfless love for God like a child to a parent. The key here to success is persistence. Since you already have a selfless love latent in your soul, you need to develop channels for that love to surface by training yourself to meditate, and I would say to talk about it constantly. Let's go back to the previous page, where he writes this in a practical lesson. Observe Torah and mitzvahs out of selfless love, purely to give God a feeling of satisfaction. These meditations should be practiced repeatedly so that habit will become second nature. They should be done verbally and audibly, since audible vocalization stimulates concentration. If you think that selfless love is beyond you, don't worry. The light of the Moses soul will help you reach this level. It's actually a power you already have in your soul. Okay, beautiful. So we have learned now we should love God like like a child loves a parent. If that doesn't work for you, like a child loves a grandparent, whatever. And audible vocalization of that relationship will help bring it out and help the meditation about it to be actualized to a feeling. We have a question here. Without speaking Hebrew, is it difficult to fully express and communicate with him? No. You have to. The only time it makes it difficult is if you're reading the prayers in Hebrew and you don't understand the Hebrew of the prayers. Then maybe you should say some of the prayers in English. That's where not speaking Hebrew will be difficult. But if you read the prayers, if you're to begin with going with English and you understand English, in general, in Jewish law, if someone cannot understand the Hebrew at all, a lot of times it is better to begin with pray in English, depending on the scenario. But it could be better to pray in English. The main thing is to speak to God, and either during prayer, which again, if you're going to pray in Hebrew or English, but outside of prayer, talk to God in a language you understand. Personally, I understand the Hebrew prayers, and when I pray to God, I will do it in the Hebrew typically. But if I ever talk to God outside of prayer, I talk to God in English. I don't talk to God in Hebrew because English is my mother tongue, so to speak. That's what I grew up with. So I don't. When I talk to God outside of prayers, I talk to God in English. It's not Hebrew's not really my native language, so it doesn't connect with me the same way. They used to call Yiddish the mama lashon, the mother tongue, right? Because that's the language that talks to your soul. Whatever language talks to your soul, sure, go ahead and use it. I want to show now a video of the Rebbe. In the past I've shown like films and presentations. I want to show an actual talk by the Rebbe. So again, it's in Yiddish. You'll hear the Rebbe's passion, but you'll have to follow along in the subtitles. And it's all about this topic of um, it's all about this topic of um, really appreciating that God is our Father and how that changes how our how we practice our Judaism. So it's a 6-minute video about. It's well worth it. And also, after you watch this video, you'll understand how the Rebbe, was great at inspiring how there's so many Chabadniks all around the world doing what they do, because the Rebbe is our inspiration, and he's the one that taught us how to care for Judaism. So let's watch this video as a closeout to this topic, and then we will go to the next topic.
der Mond von den Unionen, was pflegt, reden und überhasern, und bis dann wieder der sehen, was das sicher gehört von ihm, ist pflegt teilen mit den Talmidim.
So the Rebbe is just starting off telling a story about a certain chassid, a certain teacher who would tell a parable to his students, and you'll see how it connects again to our section here. So this is the parable he would tell his students. So let's listen.
Aber Schaß mir lernt Chsidis, und als ich bei mir sich verstandig, aber Schaß mir lernt Teire Bechlau, darf da sein, nicht wie mir lernt, wie mir lernt, oder wie mir lehnt fremde Briefe. Was mir lehnt, was tut sich im Himmel. Nur mir will wissen sein, das meint mir nicht allein. Nur gebracht auf den Ruf am Moschel. Als am Molleke Zeiten gewähnt die Schulnike, das heißt Iden, was sie pflegen mit Zeit Parnosse, pflegen sie leben in einer Steppel oder in einer Nord, wo sie seine gewähnt oder sehr wenig Iden, oder sie seine gewähnt mehr nicht wie der Schulnik allein. Bemeile, bemeschach Azman, durch Abgerissenkeit von einer jüdischen Zwiebel und nicht von einer Möglichkeit von Lernen in Yeshivas und Chadorim, ist gewöhnt zwischen sie als eine, was nicht guckendig, was Bechlau Yeshuvnik ist jene Zeiten, seine gewöhnt Größe ihrer Schamayim, aber gewöhnt auf sehr viele Heder Haidi, bis wann wird nicht gekommen kleine. Ich wusste gewähnt der Seder, als etliche Yeshuvnikis legen sich zusammenreden auf Dingen, als am Lamed für ihre Kinder, und man pflegt wegsetzen dem Lamed in einer Nord, was sie gewähnt in Merchak Ashove, in einer Nord, was sie bequem für die alle Yeshuvnikis, was haben Kinder, was leben in die Mekemis, in die Städtlich herum, in die Yeshuvim herum. Is einmal eine von den Yeshuvniken ist angekommen ein Brief mit Mokim Rochek. Als hat nicht gekonnt lehnen, hat gegeben den Brief lehnen dem Lamed, was sie haben gedungen, lernen mit den Kindern von der alle Yeshuvniken sich mit seinen Kindern. Der Bescheid der Lamed hat angegeben lehnen den Brief und hat sie gewähnt am Lamed am Moleke Zeiten, gewähnt der Klagelink ohne Kudis gelehnt, wie sie das zu sein mit der Atome, hat sich herausgewiesen, hat der Zeichen von Briefe gewähnt, als hat sich gefällt dem Yeshuvniks Vater in Verkennen. Die Bescheid hat das durchgelehnt, hat der Yeshuvnik gehalischt. Vielleicht hat Michol Messiaen sein zu den Talmidim, als schreibt der Pilot, als ihr Herzachheim den Brief hat gelehnt der Melamed. Und der Yeshuvnik nicht wenig gewusst, was steht im Brief, nicht kann lehnen in der Brief, auf viel als wollte mit Nikudis, Allah has kam we kam as in der Chonikulis. Ich sag von deswegen nicht, weil ich sag nicht verstanden, Chalischen hat gedacht, Chalischen, oder der was sagt, wie die Sache geschrieben im Brief, und was weiß die Meinung, nicht oder der was hört das von der Zweiten. Von deswegen wird gechalischt, der Yeshuvnik nicht der Melamed. Weil was ist der Terz auf dem, beim Melamed ist das ein fremder Ried, beim Yeshuvnik ist das ein Tate. והנים שולמו, בשעס מלרן חסידס, und meint, dass zweitens Tate kann lernen Chsidis und kann wissen, als was steht, und kann lernen ohne Kudis, und lernen richtig, aber auf ist nicht Chalischen. בשעס ist aber viele lernen zweiter, ist aber wissen, das meint mir lernen, dass es sein Tate, dass es sein Arvinische Bashamayim wird der Chalischen. Sie da sehen, was Steinen darf sich nicht verlernen mit der Vorzitz am Marionis Schutze. Und darf sich nicht verlernen mit Versprechen Niedigkeit darum sie. Und darf nicht sein, die Mahade nach Dieder Kausch und Divre Sefrim, da fahre es auch da Agid, was älter von ihm und Klieger von ihm und Frimer von ihm und tut das sich nicht. In der Territz ist jener Ried meint, dass es lässt sich wegen der zweiten Safote. Ich bemühe, jener hat der Teuse, dass das nicht kein Territz, als darf ich der Teuse haben. Und der Hadroche Klolis ist, als das lässt sich wegen der Wienische Bashamayim, ist das wegen jeder Rieden Segen im Vater. Als tracht der Vater Marionis Schutze, dass bringe Maschichen, aber nicht mehr meint, dass soll mehr für seinen, soll bringe Maschichen, ist nicht sein Business. Darf durchlehnen den Brief als Zweiten. Und der Übergeber, der Baal Shem Tov hat geschrieben, als demot wes ja futze meine Sache futze kosse mal Malke Mischiche. Und Kiberle in den Brief, den Yeshuvnik, und danach geht es sich weg und tut sich was wenn kommt es. Wie kaum und kam vor mir, wie der Rebbe der Baal Elu hat gesagt, dass die letzte Tage in Golos, und der Rebbe brennt die Welt von Golos. Und so tot jetzt in Biad Romo, ist Chashod jeder Piule, was man gekonnt hat, und mit tut nie, halt mir sich auf, schinte wie Shishim Riebe bei Israel, noch ein Regen in Gold. Und für was tut mir das? Der Fall ist, sich angeschmust, als in jenem Stadt, und mehr nicht der Dolmetscher, was der Melamed, was darf durchlehnen, dem Yeshuvnik, was steht im Brief. Weil das ist sicher der Hero, was man gesehen von Baba Ilula, zusammen damit, was gegessen hat, zweiten Tag. Ist nicht nur, was sich richtig gewesen mit der Lernen in Kabole mit der zweiten, noch Siris mit der zweiten. Wir kann jetzt über sehr gelernt alle bis mit der zweiten. Und gelernt werden lebend viel mit der zweiten. Und gelernt, was mit der Bavoren haben, so lassen Koscher mit der zweiten. Was jeder Bavoren der zweiten nicht, so lassen Koscher nicht mit Glasfleisch, Koscher gepschüttet, ohne keine Idee. Und nicht dem Hefersche Base, und das hat ihn gedacht haben, dachte dem Libavischen Rebbe mit Malem Mocke. Sie konnte das geschicken, die Mischores wollte das sicher die einem erklären. Und aber getan ist, dass sie gekommen wohl, ja doch, ist das Simina, das ist sein Bier. Und dass nicht der Bier, der Fall ist, darf jenem Matzel sein, der Fall ist, darf sich Matzel sein. Und durch und durch wird sich Matzel sein.
Okay. Very powerful. So this adds a very, very powerful point to what we said, understanding that God is your father. If, as we said earlier, if God is our father and we care for him like a child cares for a parent, that adds a whole nother dimension in relationship to our Judaism. It's not someone else's father. It's not like he said when you're studying Torah, it's talking to someone else. God is your father. God's talking to you. God has a message for you. And you should want to bring the Mashiach because God is your father. And not to say, well, look, he's not doing it and he's not doing it. He's not doing it. You care about it. You care about it. And therefore you want to, bring Mashiach and you want to help other people do mitzvahs. And nothing is beneath your dignity because this is something that you will go to the ends of the earth to make sure happens. And that's really the other message of God as your father. It's not just God as a father, God is your father. That's the important part. When you appreciate that God is your father, then God cares for you and takes care of you in so many ways. And you love him back like a child loves a parent in an unlimited and unbridled way, then whatever God asks, whether it's for your own Judaism, for other people, you will go out of your way and you will do it and you will go and change the world. And now you see how the Rebbe inspired his Chassidim. He's telling them, don't just read, it's often I give a sermon, I'll give a speech, and someone will come up to me and says, Rabbi, you wouldn't believe that speech was so great. That guy really needed to hear it. Or, I don't know, the liberal Jews needed to hear it, or the right-wing Jews, left-wing Jews, these people need to hear it. Whoever it is, right? And I always say, what do you mean? The message is for everybody. It might apply more to someone else, less to someone else, but the essential lesson is for each and every single one of us. The Torah is always talking to us. So easy to read things and see how it applies to others. But the Torah is always talking to us. God is always talking to us. And when there's something that needs to be done and we find out about it, we're the ones that are meant to do it. Yes, Nina, what's your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Do you feel that God loves all of his children the same? I don't feel that we as parents love all of our children the same.
So first of all, God describes when he loves his children, he calls each and every single one of us an only child. So God loves us as an only child. So the answer to your question is, I'm not going to get into whether parents have the ability to love each child equally or not, but God views each and every single one of us as an only child, which should answer your question. Yes? Yes, okay. All right, awesome. So with that, we will go a little bit to the next section. Okay, we have another 10 minutes here. We will go to the next section. The Tanya is going to ask the question that the Tanya has asked multiple times, and the Tanya gives basically the same answer each time. And the reason this question comes up each time is because of the worldview that the Tanya has around our service of God. We started off today's class explaining how in the Tanya's worldview, service of God requires feeling. Okay, service of God requires feeling. It requires us to not just do the deed, but ideally we should have feelings of love towards God. And the problem that we experienced, and we saw this in chapter 41, and we saw this in chapter, I think, 16, we saw it in a couple places. The problem we have every time is that we don't always feel it. We don't always feel it, right? So, it seems to be demanding of us something that is something that seems out of reach, right? But the Tanya says if you do a mitzvah without a feeling towards God, it's like a body without a soul. So what's going on? Do we have so many Jews going around doing mitzvahs with a body without a soul? Sounds pretty bad, right? Again, with the Tanya placing so much importance on feeling, I mean, take a try to mark yourself. How many of the mitzvahs you do are you doing with feeling, and how many you're not feeling it, right? How many are you feeling, and how many are not feeling it? It seems like Tanya has a beautiful idealistic world where we should all have feelings when we do mitzvahs, but practically it seems out of reach to most of us, and most of us will walk around failing all the time, and we're going to have a bunch of mitzvahs without souls. So again, every time that Tanya pushes the narrative about loving God or having awe of God or feelings, it'll come back to the same question because it's just an important question that pops to each and every single one of us. And the Tanya's answer is that God is realistic. And God understands. If you put in the effort, then even if you don't feel it, God makes it as if we had the feeling. So in a human relationship, that may not work for you, okay? In a human relationship, you tell your wife, well, I tried to have feelings of love and, whatever you tell your spouse, but I don't feel it, right? Maybe or maybe not they'll accept what you're saying. But God understands that love of him is difficult and it's not always within our ability to feel. And God is very understanding. And God says like this. He says, if you put in the effort to have feelings and you didn't actually feel it, I will consider it as if you felt it. So what does that mean? If you took any of these meditations that we've described till now to attempt to have a feeling towards God, even if you don't generate the actual feeling, but you thought about it, you contemplated about it, and you even understood it in your mind, but it didn't translate to a feeling, God does not hold you accountable for the lack of feeling, because ultimately the lack of feeling is not within your reach. So you might say, so this just sounds like a silly game then, right? Sounds like a silly game. So then what's the point of the whole mind meditation, right? What's the purpose? And the answer is no. It's just how it works. We do want feeling. We're just practical about it and understanding that feeling doesn't always come. So as with everything else in life that God asks of us, we are beholden for our effort. We are not beholden for the results, right? As it says in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers. Ethics of Our Fathers says, Lo alecha melacha ligmor. It's not incumbent upon us to finish the job. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you're scot-free from doing the work. So that's how Judaism works in general, right? Let's say there's a mitzvah that God's preventing us from doing, okay? We should try to do the mitzvah. Let's say there's a shortage of esrogim, okay? You don't just say, well, we can't get esrogim. No, you try to get it. And if it's prevented from you, it's prevented from you. You tried, right? So the same thing is here. The ideal worship of God is with feeling in the heart. And feeling in the heart has to be generated from the mind. Now, what is actually within our ability is to use the mind. If the mind doesn't lead to the actual feelings every single time, God's not going to hold us beholden to that because we tried to serve him, because that's the whole purpose. We're here to serve him. And so God says, if you put in the effort to serve me and there was a lack of some elements in serving me, but you put in the effort, that's enough. The goal is serving God. The goal, right? And so that is accomplished by the meditation in the mind. So let us read inside. So he says like this. He's going to say inside. So let me look inside. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to go right here to this paragraph. Let's presume that you are following the Tanya's advice and trying to develop or uncover the feeling that you love God more than yourself. You recited the meditation verbally so many times that you're beginning to become convinced. But are you really? Have you begun to love God more than yourself, or are you just being delusional? And he says like this, even if it first seems that merely by training yourself to think and feel this way, you're deluding yourself, don't worry, that's not true, because the selfless love itself and its exists latently in your heart is absolutely authentic. So number one, he's telling you the feeling is authentic, even if you don't feel it, because it's actually there. Even if the conscious expression of your selfless love lacks a certain level of authenticity, that's just the expression. That shouldn't discourage your efforts. Whatever you're feeling is anchored in and flows from something authentic. So that's a point I forgot to mention as well in my preface for this. My preface was that we're only beholden for the effort. We're not beholden for the results. The Tanya is also adding here, I forgot to mention, that not only that, but to a certain extent, you are not faking something that's not real. It's real within you, you just can't feel it. It's an interesting thing to believe, but it's real. Your love of God is real, you just can't feel it. That's what he's saying. Only there's value in bringing the love out of its latent state to be palpable, even if the results are of dubious authenticity, so that the palpable love can have a practical application with the observance of Torah mitzvahs. As we have learned, Torah mitzvahs cannot fly heavenward unless they have two wings of reverence and love. Even if the love you generate using the above meditation is lacking in authenticity, is still very worthwhile, because the palpable love will elevate the mitzvahs you perform. But again, we might ask, how can an inauthentic love be effective wing to lift your mitzvahs heavenward? To answer this question, Tanya will draw an idea we learned earlier in chapter 16. Since God is aware of the limitations holding you back from producing authentic emotion, this is what I mentioned earlier, he will assist your mitzvahs to develop the necessary wings from imperfect results of your meditation, so long as you have some effort and you have the appropriate intention. Practically speaking, you study and practice mitzvahs with selfless intention to give God a feeling of satisfaction. Intention is in your mind, and not for any personal gain, physical or spiritual, like a son serving his father. And even if that's just your intention, and you don't really feel it authentically, our sages taught that in such a case, the Holy and Blessed Be attaches a good thought to the deed. Accepting your intention in place of real feeling, and your mitzvahs performed with the intention will have wings to fly heavenward, as mentioned above. Through divine grace, your selfless intention is considered by God as if you had selfless love. That's because in your soul, you really do have selfless love, and your difficulty has been in expressing it consciously. Since you did make an effort to do so, God attaches a good thought to deed and attributes your deed as if it was performed with selfless love that you intended in your thought. This act of divine grace makes your meditative efforts worthwhile, even if the results are somewhat inauthentic. What exactly constitutes a selfless intention when observing a mitzvah? Above, the Tanya states, it's to give God a feeling of satisfaction. We now clarify this idea further. And the feeling of satisfaction can be understood in two ways. It is like the earlier example of a king's joy from a son returning after being released from prison, right? So when we do a mitzvah, we're, so to speak, reconnecting our soul to God. Our soul is here on this earth, shackled by the physicality of this world. And so when we do a mitzvah, we're returning to God, and God is so excited that we're reconnecting with him, like a king that's so excited when their son returns from prison, which our soul is in a prison in this physical earth to an extent. Or B, it may be divine satisfaction, with the idea mentioned earlier that the Holy Blessed Be desires to have a home for himself in the lowest realms, just as he has in the higher realms. The divine will is fulfilled by both of these two dynamics together, lifting the world up to God and drawing divine down into the world. Therefore, the Tanya mentions both intentions here. When you observe a mitzvah, a divine spark trapped down here in this world is released back up to God, giving him great pleasure, like the return of a child from captivity. But the mitzvah also has another effect of drawing down the divine here in this lowly world through sanctifying the physical and making a home for God in the lowest realms. Now that section, the Tanya a lot of times pulls from ideas that taught us earlier, but that is the idea. When we do a mitzvah, when we try to meditate on our love for God, how much we love for God, and we want to do anything for God, what exactly, so here he explained, what exactly is a mitzvah doing? In other words, you're loving God, but what are you giving to him by doing a mitzvah? So it's important to remember, what are we giving God by doing a mitzvah? Every time we do a mitzvah, we're doing two things. Number one is reattaching our soul to God, which God loves. It's like a child returning back to their parent. And number two, God enjoys that we're fulfilling his intention for the creation of this world, which is to bring godliness and divine awareness and presence into this world. And so every mitzvah we do, we're doing for our Father, for God, and we are accomplishing a twofold idea. So whether you're personally doing a mitzvah, you have those two things. You're returning your soul to God and bringing God into your life. And if you help someone else do a mitzvah, surely you have that same idea. You're returning that person's soul to God, and you're bringing divine awareness and presence through the mitzvah that that person is accomplishing. So with this, we conclude the second type of love that we started off. We started two more easier loves in the last week and this week. Last week we described the love of God just like you love your life, you love God. That's something more natural to you. This week we discussed how you can love God like you love your parent, more natural to you, and we explained how using speech can awaken a feeling, and even if you don't actually feel a feeling, God knows what you tried to do, and God will make that the attempted feeling that you had will be an actual feeling, and will consider your mitzvah as if it has wings and the feelings that are required to lift it up. So thank you all for coming, and we will return again next week to continue along our journey in feeling connected to God.
Yashikoach, Rabbi.